Alrighty, everybody. So I think we're going to get started here. I just like to introduce Shannon, aka JJ Behrens. He's actually worked at 12 startups, and now he's at Google, where he's been there for about a year and a half. Behrens is a developer advocate for Dart. He blogs at gynix.blogspot.com on topics such as Dart, Python, Ruby, Linux, open source software, the web, and lesser-known programming languages. So I'm going to turn it over to JJ now.
Howdy. So I'm JJ. I'm here to talk about structured web programming. This is an introduction to Dart. I see that everyone else in the audience who's missing has already seen this tutorial, so I'm really glad that everyone else is actually coding Dart instead of here. I think my work is done. I'm Shannon Behrens on Google+, and here we go. So here's the goal of Dart. Dart helps developers from all platforms build complex, high-performance client apps for the modern web. And we'll talk more about that. Maybe not. Maybe I'll talk more about that now. So who here has used Gmail or Google Maps? So those, believe it or not, were kind of hard to build. Really, really hard to build. And so it turns out that when you're building a really large application in JavaScript and you need 100 people and 1 million lines of code, JavaScript's not really the best language to do that kind of stuff, and so that's a problem we want to solve. I mean, we've tried to solve these things in the past with Google Web Toolkit and Clojure, and so Dart is the next thing in the evolution of how to solve that really, really hard problem. We also see a big move towards rich internet applications running in the browser, and we want to make them, super high performance, higher performance than we could achieve today with, our current JavaScript tools. We want to actually make it possible to get a lot faster. So imagine you go to Gmail, and instead of taking 1 or 2 seconds to start up, it takes 0.2 seconds to start up. That's kind of our goal. So here's the agenda. I'm going to have talked about the introduction and the motivations. I'm going to show the Dart language, Dart runtimes, Dart tools, and then the community in the future. And I really like questions. I just feel like I'm talking to myself if no one asks questions. So I'm going to try to leave lots of time for that. So first of all, the Dart project. It's open source. There's a BSD-style license. You can download it from dart.googlecode.com. It's not only open source, but we actually develop it in open, which is kind of fun if you want to read the code review comments and see Googlers, saying things to each other that they shouldn't say. We have a GitHub mirror and a contributing guide and so forth. Dart comes with batteries included, so this is not just a language, but it's also a set of libraries. It's a virtual machine, which is kind of a big deal. We have a Dart editor, which is a really big deal. We have browser integration, and we have a compiler to JavaScript, so everyone always asks, well, do you think the other browser vendors will ever support Dart? It kind of doesn't matter because we compile to JavaScript as well. So Dart runs on the client and server, so that's kind of a big deal. I think not too many people do that other than Node.js, and so it's kind of nice to be able to code in the same language on both places. And we target the entire mobile web, so laptops, desktops, mobile devices, running on the server, all of that. And so it's really nice to build a native app, but it's even nicer to be able to build an app once and have it run everywhere. And we like to say Dart is for modern web apps. I'm talking about rich client apps, offline capable, run with animations running at 60 frames per second, built on the ES5 plus JavaScript standard, and with lots of HTML5 goodness baked in. That's one of the things I was working on most. And we're still in technology preview. We launched last October, so we're still building out the platform. This is not something that's set in stone, but it's moving crazy fast. And we have some changes ahead with the M1 release where we, decided we didn't like some features of our syntax, and so we're changing it up a little bit. But we'll talk more about that at the end. And then your feedback actually counts a lot. The reason why we released it so early. It can be interpreted natively using the Dart VM, or it can be compiled to JavaScript, which is interpreted. we decided to release this really early. We didn't wait for it to like be completely done. We released it early so that we could get a lot of feedback and so that people could tell us, what they want. And so filing bugs on like dartbug.com and saying, hey, I would really like this feature, that's really important for us. So motivations. So web development's good. It supports iterative development. You edit something, you hit save, and you hit reload. It's really nice. It's platform independent, so that's great. It's evolving fast, and it's getting faster. And then modern browsers are on the rise. So you can't really see this graphic too much, but this is like the growth of browsers, and like this huge splotch of color is like all the features and crazy things they're getting. So it's actually moving crazy fast. Before V8 is the JavaScript engine for Chrome, and before V8, JavaScript was pretty slow. V8 came along and it actually made JavaScript 350 times faster. And when you could make something 350 times faster, that completely changes the whole dynamics of the game. You could do stuff in JavaScript you couldn't do before. And Dart comes out of that same team, the same V8 guys, where they're like, there's a limit to how fast we could push JavaScript. What if we create a new language built from day one to make it crazy fast, but also scalable for large teams? We think it should be easier to understand program structure. That's not always easy with JavaScript. We want better tool support. That's especially not really possible with JavaScript because it's not really, the IDE can't really understand what you're doing at a fundamental level. We want to start up faster, like 10 times faster, and we have initial support with this thing called snapshots, where you fire up the code on the server, ship it down to the client, and then the client keeps going. And so we could actually literally start up 10 times faster. We want to make it easier to work with large teams because the web apps that we build at Google tend to be really, really big. I mean, if you look at the spreadsheets app, that was not one guy. That was a lot of code. And we want to meet user demands and sidestep 15 years of cruft. Who here likes JavaScript? Like I'm one of them, so you don't have to like feel bad about that. But who here likes the DOM API? Yeah, like no one ever says yes to that. So we think innovation is essential. I mean, we don't want to be doing the same thing forever. We want to actually be improving and moving the web forward. And we think that Dart fills a vacuum, provides a new option, and we also think that you shouldn't have to be the like crazy JavaScript wizard that's been coding in it for 10 years just to develop a web app. We'd like to get a lot of the other people who aren't JavaScript wizards to be able to build web apps. So that's one of the things we're going after. So let's talk about the language. You can learn Dart really quickly. This is like, on the one hand, it's not as like innovative as something like Haskell, but on the other hand, it takes like a few hours to learn it. So it's actually really nice. You could get started in Dart crazy quickly. It's a class-based, single inheritance, object-oriented language. It has this thing called implicit interfaces, where every class is its own interface. It has optional static typing, so we'll talk more about that in a minute. We have real lexical scoping. Who here likes closures? Please, someone. Okay, good. Thank you. It makes me sad when I see people where no one raises their hand. So anyway. And it has a concurrency model based on message passing instead of mutable shared state. So I think that's actually a way easier way to do concurrency. And it has familiar syntax. Who here likes semicolons? Okay, who here doesn't?
I don't really like semicolons.
Yeah, who here doesn't like semicolons? Yeah, me too. But we have semicolons. Yeah, it's because it's like we wanted to make it super familiar. So here's an example with variables, lists, iteration, and string interpolation. So we have a main method. We say var fruits equals this list of fruits, and then we say for fruit in fruits print I like to eat fruit. So there's two things that stand out. First of all, if you've coded JavaScript, you have this has own property when you loop over objects. You don't have to do that anymore. And then the second thing is we have proper string interpolation, so that's pretty nice. So here's an example of functions, function aliases, and closures. We have a type def here, and it's a new type of function called an adder that takes a num and returns a num. We have a function called make adder that takes a number and it returns an adder function. So here we are returning a function, and that function itself takes an I and returns n plus I. So this is a closure. And then we're creating a new adder with 2, and we print add 2 to 3, and we get 5. So that's straightforward if you're a closure lover. So it's actually fairly hard to. It's actually fairly hard to share code today. So if you're using certain JavaScript framework, MooTools or Prototype or Dojo or EXTJS, all of these have different approaches to doing classes. And so they don't interoperate so easily. It's not so seamless to go from one to the other. But in Dart, like, we have the notion of what a class is. This is what a class looks like. And so if you have a bunch of different frameworks built on top of Dart, and there are already like 4 or 5 of them, then we don't have to fight over what a class looks like. We know what a class is. So here's a class point, has 2 instance members, x and y. Here's a constructor, and we have this cool syntax, this.x and this.y, where it automatically says this.x equals x and this.y equals y. So that's a nice little time saver. We have a function called distance2. And then over here we have a class widget, and it has some stuff in it. And then we can say class panel implements widget. So we're not extending widget. Widget is implicitly an interface, so we could just implement it if we want to. And then here we say class menu extends panel. So it's a really nice way to like have interfaces and go between frameworks and so forth. Okay, it's easier with Dart to reason about unfamiliar code. So here we have a function called recalculate, and it takes an origin, an offset, and an estimate. Okay, so what's an origin, what's an offset, and what's an estimate? And does this do something or does this return something? We can't really tell by looking at this code. Now, we could add comments, but comments can't be checked so easily with tools unless you're using Google Closure. Here's the Dart. We have recalculate. We know that it returns a num. It takes an origin, which is a point. It takes an offset, which is a num. And it takes an estimate, which is a bool, and the default value is false. So, and you could pass that as a keyword argument. So there's like, just looking at the function signature, we could actually tell a lot more about this code. Yeah? No. Yeah, so above that would be an import math. Yeah. So let's talk about this weird thing called optional static type annotations. So you could actually code Dart and leave out all the types. And we have this thought that like maybe you want to get started really quickly. So you just code something really quickly, and maybe, your startup is successful. Suddenly you get funding, Series A, Series B, Series C. You have 100 people. And you start putting in types in your code to make it more solid, more rigorous, so that you could deal with that large team. So I like to say that Dart is a more scalable language in that it scales with the size of your team. You could code at a low level where you couldn't do that like in Java, because like Java, you have to type the type annotations, but you could code like at a higher, more scalable level, more engineers by adding type annotations. We support duck typing, like all the scripting languages, but sometimes, you want inline documentation. We want easier code for developers to understand. We want machines to give us early errors and warnings. I'm a Python/Ruby guy, so like I really like coding fast, but I also really like it when Dart Editor could tell me that my code is borked even before I run my tests. That's really nice. And we already talked about scaling, and then so now I'm going to demo the Dart Editor. So here's the Dart Editor. It might look a little bit familiar to some of you. It's based on Eclipse components, but it is not Eclipse. So it's actually super, super stripped down and not confusing. So we have, yes. So we have a class Ninja, we have a class Pirate. They each have an attack method. We have a main where we say for var warriors equals new Ninja and new Pirate. For var warriors and warriors, warrior.attack. And so now, like my font's really small, so I can't see what I'm supposed to show. Oh, autocomplete. So here I'm going to go down to main, and I'm going to say, var p equals new Pirate. And I hit p dot control space, and it automatically tells me all the things that a pirate can do. So I could attack. Now, let's show some... jump to definition. So here I'm looking at attack, and I don't know where that is, so I hit command, and I click on it, and it goes up to attack. Well, that's kind of cool, but it's not actually that impressive. Here, I have div.text equals some string interpolation of div.text with a message. Here, inside the string interpolation, I have this magical div thing, and I could click on this text. And it actually takes me deep into the Dart source code to where text is defined. That's some pretty impressive code navigation. I'm always impressed by that. Okay, so code navigation works really nice, and that's helpful if you're dealing with really, really large projects. It's not so easy to know where stuff comes from. So let's look at this p.attack. Let's say that I'm a new guy and or I decide to change the pirate attack so that it takes an int in. Well, I save that, and automatically I get this little warning that says missing argument of type int. Well, I'm still kind of a noob, so I'm going to pass a string called int. And it gets this little thing right here. It says string is not assignable to int. And notice I did not compile. I didn't really do it. Oh, I hit save. But I didn't run it. I didn't run my test. It's just automatically telling me my code is borked. And so that's actually really nice. That's a nice experience to code. So let me. So he's saying, do we have automatic type coercion? And the answer is most explicitly no, because we really want programmers to know we want to be stricter, not looser. So let's look at and everyone undervalues let's say I say we have var warriors. So let's say warriors 2 dot something. There's an error there. It says cannot resolve warriors 2 expected identifier. A lot of people, myself included, I love scripting languages, but I don't know if I misspelled something in Python until I really run the code. I mean, there's some static analysis tools, but they're, with superclassing and all that kind of stuff, it's not overly strong. Here we could tell you misspelled something. And, I don't make a lot of type errors in Python, but I make spelling errors occasionally. And so it's nice to be able to find errors like that even before running it. Okay, so now I want to show rename. So here I have pirate attack, so I could right-click on it and rename it. And I'm going to call it kill. Yes. So this one was an edge case. Said kill. I'm duck typing, so it doesn't work perfectly well. But it's not search and replace. It understands different class hierarchies. So rename is actually fairly smart. And then I want to show Dartium. So we have a version of Chrome with the Dart VM integrated into it. That's kind of a big deal because when was the last time you saw a new programming language in the browser? This just doesn't happen very often. So that's called Dartium, and I'm going to show you an example of that running. Nope, that's the wrong one. So let's warriors.dart run. Okay, my sword is dead. So this is not using JavaScript at all. This is pure Dart. So that's pretty cool. But we have to support other browsers, so we could still run in JavaScript. So here we're compiling using Dart to JS. I told them that if I was going to come out here, we needed a more powerful tool. I wanted them to rename it ditka.2js, but they didn't listen to me. Is that not funny anymore? Do you guys remember Ditka? No. Ugh. Man, I'm too old for this. Okay. Okay, well, that makes me feel better. It's not funny. Okay, so now let me show you what it looks like to debug. So we're going to hit, we're going to put a breakpoint, and I'm going to run in Dartium. So it pulls it up there. And here I have a stack trace of where I am, and I have all my local variables, and I could actually step over the code in my editor. Not like in some separate tool, but in my editor I could debug my code, which is that doesn't happen in too many web technologies. So that's kind of pretty cool. And then I covered compiling the JavaScript already. Okay. So, does anybody know that this problem with JavaScript where you have, an outer function and you're returning an inner function, and in the inner function you're making use of this, and this is actually no longer this, it's actually bound to the window object, and it causes bugs in your code, and then you cry? Does this happen to you guys? Yeah, okay, that's happened to me too. That doesn't happen. In fact, well, you don't have to write this. So here we have class awesome as a constructor awesome taking a button, and it says button on click add. Takes an event and it calls cool, and cool is some other method in that same class. Well, first of all, you don't have to write this, and then second of all, it's lexically scoped, so it doesn't get confused as to where you are. So that's pretty neat. So we talked about for loops already. Actually, I want to point out another thing. So I said earlier that the DOM API is not that good looking. So we have this new, everyone always asks, well, does jQuery work in Dart? And the correct answer is Dart is its own jQuery. We have our own approach to making the DOM better, and it's actually integrated deep into Dartium. But it also works with Dart to JS. And so we have button, on, click, add, and you have a callback. So fairly straightforward. So we talked about for loops, and I showed you guys this one-line function syntax. We have cool things like for each and map and filter and all those functional things. If you like those type of things, I do. We also have support for creating more readable method calls. So we have this flip flags, boolean on, boolean up, boolean hidden. But when you call flip flags, you say true, false, and true. And you're like, what is that about? I don't know. So instead, you could define things this way, and then you could say flip flags on is true, up is false, and hidden is true. Or you could even just leave out hidden, and you have a default value. So this is just built into the language. You don't have to do funky magic with objects and defaults and stuff like that. So that's kind of nice. Okay, so next, Dart isolates. Our isolates are our way to do concurrency. So they're inspired by Erlang processes. Who codes Erlang? No one? No one ever raises their hand. It's funny. I'm the only guy. They're kind of, in a certain sense, they're like Unix processes. Unix processes are completely isolated from one another, and the only way they could talk is via message passing of some sort, like TCP or Unix sockets or something. Isolates are the same way. And so in Java, you have this notion of you have this shared state, and you have to protect it with locks. And then you have race conditions, and someone forgets to do the lock right, and that's not how it works in Dart. You just have these separate isolates, and then they just pass messages back and forth to each other. And the nice thing is you could do things like have one isolate serving one request, and then you upgrade your software, and the other isolate starts running with a new copy of the software, so you don't even have to restart your server. It just seamlessly upgrades itself. And isolates are this concept that could work in a separate thread or an entirely separate process. And for HTML5 apps, we have them running in web workers, so it's a nice, straightforward way. There's another cool thing we do where you're building out a web app, and you're integrating Google Maps, and you have a YouTube video, and you have Facebook login, and you have all these other third-party things, and you're using Discuss for comments. And you're like, well, how do I protect these things? I want some encapsulation so that they don't mess with each other. We think isolates is a great solution for that, where each part can be in its own isolate, completely separate of all the other guys. And the only way they can mess with each other is by passing messages. So you don't have to worry about some guy going in and monkeying with your prototype and owning your JavaScript. So here's what it looks like to do isolates. We're spawning a function called echo port, and we're calling hello from main, so that sends a message. And then when we get the reply, we just print the reply. Here's the isolate. We receive a message, and then we send a response, I received. So it's actually fairly straightforward. We talked about monkey typing, and then we also have no such method support. So if you try to call a method and that doesn't exist, and you have a no such method, it gets called instead, and then you could do all kinds of magic. Yeah, I like to put all of my code into a single no such method, and then that way if they misspell method names, then I'll just guess at what method they were actually trying to call. Not really. Yeah. It's really flexible programming, man. Okay, so Dart on the server. We have a VM. It runs on the server side. We have support for files, directory, sockets. We have an HTTP server and client. We have an asynchronous future style, and you could share code between the client and the server. If you've used Node.js, who here has used Node.js? So it looks a lot like Node.js. So here's what it looks like. We're importing Dart IO, creating a new HTTP server. We're listening on a given interface and port. We're setting a request handler. This is a callback. It takes a request and response, and it just writes hello world to the response output stream. So fairly straightforward server-side programming. Okay, here's what it looks like on the client. We're importing Dart :HTML, and we have a button. So we create a new button, and we're setting the text. We're adding some classes, and we say button on click add. We receive an event, and we say window.alert, and then document.body elements add button. So like when the DOM came out, it was kind of like, I don't know, I have a feeling it was designed by like C++/Java programmers. So it always felt a little bit odd in JavaScript. The DOM code in Dart feels like Dart. So it's like, when you're looking at, element.nodes, it's a list, a normal Dart list. And so everything is, feels normal, which is kind of nice. We talked about compiling Dart to JavaScript. We target modern browsers. So like I tried, I compiled some code using Dart to JS, and then I tried to run it under links. Actually, that does not work. Okay, good. Okay, and dialing in the humor, like I got to get the right wavelength. So we support this thing called tree shaking and dead code elimination. There's this thing in the JavaScript world where it's like, oh, I can't use your library. It's like 30K, and I don't want to like add a 30K dependency or whatever. Like we don't have that problem in the Dart world. You could use whatever library you want, and whatever code you actually use, that's what gets shipped in like the compiled version. Everything else gets like discarded. So it's called dead code elimination and tree shaking. We just get rid of all the stuff you don't use. And our Dart to JS compiler is written in Dart itself, which is kind of cool. It's like a proof that the language is real. And so we can generate smaller output. And the other neat thing is, and this has only been happening fairly recently, the JavaScript that we compile is not a straight one-to-one translation between Dart and JavaScript. Like CoffeeScript is that way, TypeScript is that way. That is not our approach at all. We have like these brilliant compiler guys, and so they do all these weird optimizations such as inlining and like happy code paths and stuff like that. So a lot of times we could actually generate JavaScript that is faster than the JavaScript you would write by hand, which is kind of weird to hearing, but it's like we could do optimizations that just don't fit inside the human brain. We could look at the code in a way that humans can't do it. So I talked about Dart Editor. So you could run Dart apps directly in Chromium. I showed you that. So this is great for writing code because like you don't have to compile to JavaScript. You could just run it immediately. You have the like in editor debugging. So that is a very, very nice rapid turnaround coding process. We showed all of that. And then we have a package manager called Pub. Kind of looks like NPM in the Node world or Ruby Gems. So there's not, that's, it's what you might expect. Okay, so the documentation for Dart is actually really good because we actually have people who get paid to write this stuff, and they're good at their job. So we have api.dartlang.org where all the core library is documented. We have Dart Synonym where it shows you like, here's what you write in JavaScript, and here's how to compile it to Dart. And so that's really helpful. There's also a really great blog post that shows you how to do things in CoffeeScript, jQuery, normal JavaScript, and Dart. And so that if you know jQuery, then you go there and you're like, oh, here's how I do it in jQuery. Oh, and here's how I do it in Dart. I found that really helpful because I had like jQuery memorized. I didn't know Dart early on. We have a tour of the Dart language. We have a tour of the Dart libraries. We have a book that we're working on. But actually someone from outside of Google beat us to the punch, and they already released a book, and now there's like 4 or 5 books, which is amazing. I mean, it's not even like completely done yet. So we have tons of third-party stuff. So if you're like, is there going to be an Angular JS for Dart? Well, there's already one that's like that. That's called, which one is that? It's like, I don't know if it's on this one. There's like, if you like Angular JS or you like Windows Forms or like or AS3 or whatever, there's like, for each framework that you might be coming from, someone ported it to Dart, like pure MVC. And so it's like, whichever, pick your poison. They're all like different types of frameworks for different types of styles. We have mod_Dart for running on Apache. That's pretty cool. And then Dart runs on Heroku. Really nice. Who likes Heroku? I personally love Heroku. I think it's awesome. So that's pretty cool. Oh, and some guy, this amazed me. Some guy ported his Nintendo emulator to Dart. I don't know how you do that. Like, it's a lot of C++ code, and he just like did it in a hackathon, like over a weekend. So that guy was awesome. Because it was a hackathon. That's why. Okay, so here's how to join the Dart conversation. We're on Twitter, Google+, there's our hashtag, blogs, IRC mailing list, and Stack Overflow. So if you have questions on Dart, Stack Overflow is really good because when you ask the question, then I answer the points. Then I answer the question, then I get points. I'm not sure what I'll ever do with those points, but I feel like good getting them. So that's cool. And I get paid to answer questions, so that's even better. So if you want to get started, just download the Dart editor. Hopefully, if you're going to come to the Code Lab tonight at 6:30, you already have it. Because if everyone tries to download the Dart editor at the same time, it's not going to go well. I have a copy stored on my laptop, but it's better if you just download it ahead of time. We have a standalone SDK if you want to do that, but I think the Dart editor is like half the reason for using Dart because it's so nice. We also have IntelliJ support. That's pretty cool. The IntelliJ guys wrote it. Who here likes IntelliJ? I like it a lot. So you can learn Dart at dartling.org. And then, okay, future. So I want to save time, so I got like 6 minutes. So we have tons of stuff coming in the M release. Like, I'm not actually going to read all of those things, but it's like we have all kinds of weird stuff. So on jQuery, you say, you chain things together, and then you have this one long chain. We have like syntax for that, so you could write ... A and then ... B and then ... C. It's a neat syntax, and we're changing the way exceptions are like structured, and there's like lots of breaking changes, and you're like, oh no, you're breaking the language, you are so evil. But then on the other hand, we have Dart Editor, and Dart Editor says, would you like me to fix your code? And you're like, yes. And then it just fixes your code. So that's pretty cool. We're excited about that. So today you learned that Dart compiles to modern JavaScript, is easy to learn, has type annotations that fit your style, helps you avoid common web programming puzzlers. You don't have to remember equals equals versus equals equals equals. Runs on the client and server, ships an editor, is in active development, and has an active community. Dart is structured web programming compatible with today's web, so please give it a try and give us feedback at dartlang.org. And thank you very much. Now, I will finally take questions.
So have you sold it inside Google yet?
Yes. Maybe not to every team, because Google's like 30,000 people. But yes, we have large projects being written in Dart inside Google. Because they were already using things like Clojure and GWT. And Dart's really nice. So
I know for App Engine, they use GWT some. But what do you think, would Dart be a really good replacement for that to make web apps?
So he says on App Engine they use GWT. Would Dart be a good replacement? So yeah, a lot of people use Java on App Engine, then they use GWT, and that's a good mix. We do not yet have App Engine support for Dart. I think it's kind of a no-brainer that it will happen eventually. Like in the meantime, I suggest people use Heroku. But yeah, it will be. I'm looking forward to the day when I do Dart on the server and Dart on the client running on App Engine. That'll be really nice.
What are the compile times from Dart to JS for larger projects?
So how fast does it compile for larger projects? I don't know. It's not like the compile time is not something we were optimizing for like Go did. So I don't know. We do have one project that's like 14,000 lines of code, but I never compiled it, so I don't know. And most of the time, remember, you only have to compile when you're shipping. The nice thing is when you're developing, you could spend almost all your time in Dartium. And so that's actually a nice development. It makes code run faster. And yeah. So. I flew all the way here. Like, you got to ask questions.
So is Gmail going to be ported to Dart?
I couldn't say.
So, of the libraries and frameworks that were built, are there any like UI things that you can use on the client side? Like some UI frameworks, like I don't know.
Are there any UI frameworks for Dart on the client side? And the answer is yes. There's 4 of them right now. We're building our own based on web components, which is actually pretty cool. If you haven't seen web components, they're really neat. They're like encapsulation. It's like subclassing the button in the browser. So we're excited about that, and we're right about to release that.
Is there any JS to Dart? So if I have an existing project in JS.
Is there any JS to Dart? No, but you know, like I happen to be looking at some smart people, so I think there's an open project there, and we would. Well, actually, one thing that would be great is actually a Clojure to Dart, because Clojure has all the optional static type annotations, and so that actually would be a really, really useful project, and there are Clojure projects out there, so that'd be great.
What was the initial kind of like motivation to make Dart?
Okay, so what was the motivation behind Dart? So we had, you know, Lars Bach and Casper Lund, and they're all working on this V8, JavaScript engine for Chrome, and every quarter their goal is to make it much faster. And then, like, so they're doing crazy JIT things, and it's like, then they're at some point, it's like they can't get it to be much faster, and they're like, the only way we're going to make this faster is if we change the language, because JavaScript is a very, very loose language. You could have like, you could do all kinds of things behind its back, and it has to be really, really dynamic. And there's lots of things where you can't really assume in JavaScript, and so Dart is really meant to be a much faster language. So, and also to make it easier to build large applications.
So why write an entirely new language instead of just figuring out like, we like Python, let's make that run in a browser? Like,
why not make Python run in the browser? So I would say that let me see if I could do 3 reasons before forgetting my first 2. Okay, the first thing is that, so getting arbitrary languages to run in the browser is a good idea, and we have this thing called Knackle, a native client, where you could like compile your C to run in the browser. And so for Python, I think Knackle is a good approach, and then we're coming out with this thing called pknackle, which compiles it to something like LLVM, and that way it's like independent. And so that's the solution for there. But we wanted something that was really familiar with JavaScript programmers, and people could get started literally in like 3 hours. And we also wanted a language that was built from day one to be a browser language. And Python really isn't that. Python has lots of things where it's not perfectly a good fit for the browser. So, yeah.
That's 3, okay. So you talked about how Dart could be used in the back end, and you showed some examples, but I didn't see databases on that list of all the things it can do.
Yeah.
Can I
so
look
databases. So we have a MongoDB driver, we have a Redis driver, and someone made a MySQL driver. We don't yet support Microsoft Access. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know if anyone's done a Postgres driver. I haven't heard of one. Sorry about that. Yes, that would actually really, that's actually a really useful project. So that's a big deal, especially since Heroku is PostgreSQL based. I'm sure that would be really good. So.
Why didn't you guys use a bytecode compiler?
That is a great question. Why didn't we use a bytecode compiler? And we actually have a really good article. So if you Google for Dart articles, you'll see why not a bytecode compiler. And the basic problem is, when you have Java, and you compile it to bytecode, you can't actually trust that bytecode because other people can generate bytecode that is not really safe and could never be generated by Java itself. So you have to verify the bytecode, and that's something that you have to do in runtime. So I actually met the guy, he lives in Aarhus, Denmark, who wrote the bytecode verifier for the JVM. And he's like, this just sucks. Like, you have to distrust this bytecode. Whereas if you completely skip that step, then you don't have to worry about someone generating bytecode that could never actually come from Java. So it's a big deal. And then of course, like the upside for using a bytecode is that you could have multiple languages compiling to that bytecode. But the fact of the matter is everything that like getting languages to run on the JVM is not so easy when the language is weird. You could make any type of language you want that works like Java, but it's not at all easy to make languages that don't work like Java. And so we think that like instead of compiling to bytecode, you can compile to Dart if that's what you want to do. And Dart's not a bad language to compile to, and you see Dart compiling to JavaScript, so it's straightforward. But the article has lots more details if you are interested. So there's like it's really, really like well spelled out. So
you talked about how well Dart was designed for the browser. How do you feel it was designed for the server side?
So how well is it a good fit for the server side? Well, right now it's based on like Node.js, and so everything is asynchronous, everything is callbacks. We have this cool thing called futures, where it's like a layer of indirection on top of callbacks that gives you certain nice advantages. So that looks a lot more like twisted if you're from the Python world. Twisted had deferreds. So there's a few advantages there. The nice thing is we have control over the syntax. So we could do things in Dart to make stuff syntactically simpler that you can't add in other languages because the syntax is kind of fixed. But I'm actually really excited about the future of Dart on the server because we have these things called isolates, and I'm really looking forward to a day where we have each web request comes in, gets handled on its own isolate, and then that's a very, very nice programming model. So I'm looking forward to that stuff, and I will keep begging them for those kind of features. That is my goal.
Would it be possible to continue to make kind of like breaking changes to the language? I thought it was really cool how the editor would like update your code base for you. And since it's running in the browser, you could probably even have different versions of Dart that would handle like maybe the version. So that way you're not stuck with like supporting a feature or something that you really want to change but can't because of all the existing.
Yeah, so how are we going to deal with updates? Are we ever going to be frozen? Well, the nice thing is that Chrome updates, right? Like it's not like Chrome. No one runs a 2-year-old version of Chrome. Like if they disconnected for the internet to prevent the updates, more power to them. But like we have control over updating the VM. We're not trying to get the language perfectly so that it will never change. And as you said, the editor could update your code anyway. And so right now we're really, really focused on making a clean, awesome language, and we're not trying to make it so that it will never change. On the other hand, like if you're doing, if you want Dart to never change, just don't upgrade your editor. Your code won't magically break because, whatever, if you have an editor and it's compiling to JavaScript, that's not suddenly going to stop working.
And all the new versions of Chrome have that new Dart language. Is it possible to do that in such a way that it doesn't break all the existing code out there, but still allows forward progress to be made?
Okay, so you're upgrading on the server, and you have a bunch of like Dart VMs in the wild. So I think as much as possible, we're going to try to like keep those things like at arm's length. So like the Dart running on the server should have as little as possible to do with Dart running in the browser. So we have this snapshotting, so of course you have to agree on that format. But once you get that format done once, then you can make syntactic changes, all kinds of other stuff in the browser and server, and have them be independent, and that's fine.
Okay.
But then, of course, like if you're on a project, you're going to use the same version of Dart for your server code and the client code. It wouldn't make sense to use different versions of Dart. And we're going to slow down at some point. It's just we don't want to slow down yet. We want to like make an awesome language before we start slowing down.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and we have like 10 minutes. Any more?
Is it possible to, like, let's say I already have an existing web app, but I don't want to have to rewrite it all, but I do want to add some new functionality, and I want to do that in Dart. Can Dart kind of play nicely with an existing, PHP app or Python Django app?
So can Dart play nicely with an existing Django or PHP app. Well, yeah, so if you want to have PHP or Python on the server and Dart on the client, that works perfectly fine. And I've had experience doing that. That's fine. And you don't even have to have your whole app written in Dart. We just launched our JavaScript compatibility layer, and so you could have parts of the page running in JavaScript, parts of the page running in Dart, and that works out fine.
I just have 2 questions now. My first question was, what's the performance difference between running something in Dartium, excuse me, and then compiled to JavaScript?
Okay, hang on. I only have memory for one.
All right.
I have low buffer space. So what's the performance difference between Dartium and using Dart to JS? So we internally track these things, and we treat kind of performance as a feature. And so we're not yet as fast as we'd like to be. In some of our initial tests, we're finally getting to the point where our Dart to JS output is running 20% faster than normal JavaScript output. So, I mean, normal JavaScript written by hand, so that's kind of cool. But we're not yet getting the performance numbers we want, and that's probably just one thing where it's going to take time. Right now we're focused on features and not performance, and then at some point we let those performance geeks run wild, and then it'll be completely different. So, and next question.
I was going to ask, besides how it interplays with server-side technologies, can it play nice with JavaScript where it's talking with it?
Yeah, so what's our JavaScript interrupt story? So we just launched an article, so if you look for Dart JavaScript article, you'll find it, and where we explain how to interoperate with JavaScript. Now, it's not perfectly as seamless as like CoffeeScript, and that's because, remember, we have a new VM. Like, and getting VMs, like a JavaScript VM and a Dart VM to go cross each other, like, that's not so easy, especially with distributed garbage collection issues. That's kind of hard. But we think it's going to pay off in the long term because we're not going to be able to get like snapshots where we start up 10 times faster if we don't change the VM. We're not going to get a lot of the performance things that we want if we don't change the VM. And so there is some, it's harder to interoperate with JavaScript, but we think it's going to pay off. Yeah.
I think this may have been kind of similar to the question I was asked up there, but if I write a program in Dart, and I run that on the Dart VM, then I write the same program in JavaScript, and I run that on V8, which one's going to be faster?
Yeah, so that's what I was mentioning. Like, we don't have public benchmarks yet, so we haven't like thoroughly tested it, but we are finally getting some initial numbers where Dart compiled to JavaScript can run 20% faster than the code, than the JavaScript you write by hand. Because Dart code running on the Dart VM. So the Dart VM is not as fast as we'd like. We're still working on that. Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's one of those things where it's like performance. You could work on features or performance, not both at the same time, and it's just not the highest priority thing for us right now.
Currently, there's a JavaScript API for Google Maps. Do you think there will be a new API for Dart or native compatibility within Dart?
Okay, so will there be a Dart API for Google Maps? So when we launched our when we launched our article on how to interoperate with JavaScript, one of the examples was how to integrate with Google Maps. And so there's already sample code for how to do that. I really don't think the Maps team is going to come out with the Dart API. Instead, we'll just continue to interoperate with the JavaScript API. But the other cool thing is that we got support. A lot of the newer Google APIs are based on this like new API framework where you could get one client library and it works for all the APIs. And that framework was ported to Dart. So if you need to interoperate with like Google Plus or there's a bunch of them, like the newer YouTube stuff, or there's like a bunch of different APIs that Google has. We have client libraries that work in Dart natively. So that's pretty cool. Client or server. Okay, more, or are we running down? Oh, okay.
Cross-domain JSON?
Cross-domain JSON. So JSON P. And we, in that JavaScript article, how to interoperate with JavaScript, we show how to interoperate with the Twitter API. So it's an example of it. Yeah, it works. Okay. No one's going to ask me about TypeScript? Okay.
What about TypeScript?
Well, if you guys don't know about it, I'm like Microsoft came out with this language called TypeScript that is a competitor to Dart. That was fun. That was like a few days ago. Yeah.
So there would be a question, like, if one can't get the Dart, the Dart VM into other browsers, would could you get some of the benefit from annotating your compiled JavaScript with type note and stuff like that? It's just kind of an interesting question.
Yeah, but I think that both TypeScript and Dart compile to JavaScript, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. Anyway, is that it? Okay. Thank you guys very much for coming, and I will be around to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Also, stick around later tonight at 6:30, I believe, we're doing a Dart workshop. So JJ is going to walk us through building our very first Dart web app. So be sure to come. It's going to be up in 24:05. Be sure to come by for that.
And we're going to be doing like WebSockets, so it's not just like a simple web app either. So.
Yeah.